The arrival of winter has exacerbated the cruel conditions that Gazans were already facing. Beneath the cold skies, families struggle more than ever against the unforgiving combination of destroyed homes, dwindling resources, and insufferable isolation. Today, we shed light on a tragedy that is now entering its second winter, a humanitarian crisis that cries out for compassion and action. With spring months still away, what can the world do to bring warmth and hope back to Gaza? Ladies and gentlemen, this is Think Tank. With December just days away, Gaza is facing another miserable winter. In addition to the existing poor conditions, displaced Palestinians are now facing the cold weather, heavy rains and flooding. Torrential rains have compounded the suffering of Palestinians displaced by Israel's genocidal war on Gaza. The spokesperson for the Palestinian Civil Defense in Gaza, Mahmoud Basal, said that rainfall has caused severe damage to tents housing thousands of displaced people, with water flowing inside the tents and damaging mattresses and luggage. He added that the current situation signals a real humanitarian catastrophe if immediate intervention does not take place. On top of that, the harsh winter has caused the spoilage of food and other supplies after hundreds of tents housing displaced Palestinians were flooded amid the ongoing Israeli offensive. Heavy rain has flooded tents for displaced Palestinians across Gaza, bringing more misery to 2.3 million people who have been facing non-stop Israeli bombardment. In addition, thousands of displaced people have requested new tents and caravans from aid donors to shield them from seasonal flooding, which has recently caused much damage to refugee camps. With the arrival of Gaza's rainy season, the UN's Palestinian Refugee Agency has warned that 500,000 people are threatened by sewage floods and that cold temperatures will take a toll on thousands of malnourished people. Louise Wateridge, a spokesperson for UNRWA, said an estimated 500,000 people in Gaza could be flooded with sewage once winter rains start. She added that rainfall causes sewage to accumulate in low-lying areas and that displaced people are using some kind of makeshift toilet, attempting to move the sewage away from their shelters. According to Wateridge, winter causes malnourished people to get sicker because it all works together against their health and well-being. And for more analysis, we're joined from Occupied Jerusalem by Dr. Munir Nasiba, a professor of international law and humanitarian law as well. Dr. Nasiba, thank you very much for joining us. Sir, let me ask you now, how does international humanitarian law address the collective suffering caused by the winter season in conflict zones like Gaza?
International humanitarian law provides that civilians should be sheltered and protected during the times of war and conflict. Unfortunately, this is not what we have been witnessing since the beginning of this genocidal campaign by Israel in the Gaza Strip. Since then, Israel has been continuously not only destroying the homes and the hospitals of the Gaza Strip, as well as schools and other facilities. But it has been indeed dehumanizing the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, as we have witnessed as early as the first week of this genocidal campaign. Netanyahu and Gallant both called the Palestinian people human animals, and indeed they have treated the Palestinian people as much less than subhuman. The starvation that we have been witnessing, the increasing diseases and pandemics that have been spreading among the civilian population in the Gaza Strip are all a result of the Israeli policies that have prevented food, humanitarian aid from reaching the Gaza Strip. They have prevented any attempts of reconstruction. They have continued until today to demolish the necessary facilities, including the infrastructure in the Gaza Strip. This is only part of the Israeli genocidal intention. This has been actually examined by the International Court of Justice in its provisional order for provisional measures in the South Africa versus Israel case. It has also been examined by the International Criminal Court when it issued the arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant. The first crime that Netanyahu and Gallant were accused of was starvation as a method of war, and this includes food, water, but also other necessary facilities. The court also approved the accusation of persecution of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, and when it cited persecution, it also explained that the Israeli regime has prevented the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip from the most basic rights, including medical aid and many other necessary facilities and needs. So certainly international humanitarian law was established and enacted by the international community over a century, more than a century ago, in order to protect civilians from these violations. However, we continue to see that the Israeli government is totally ignoring not only international humanitarian law, but also explicit orders and decisions by international legal bodies like the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court.
Mm-hmm. And ladies and gentlemen, we're also now joined from Gaza by Mr. Amjad Al-Shawa, the director of the Palestinian NGO network. Welcome, Mr. Shawa, to Q News. Now, from your perspective on the ground, how has the winter season amplified the suffering of Gazans, especially the displaced and vulnerable?
Thank you. Yes, today I was in the Gaza coastal area where the seawater flooded thousands of the IDPs, the displaced tents, and we have no other equipment to provide these people with tents or the shelter equipment. You guys know that 95% of the population of Gaza were firstly displaced by the occupation, and we have this water flooding everywhere in Gaza City, in the north, in the middle, in the south. While it's the middle area and the south area where we have the majority of displaced people, they are staying on tens of thousands of tents. These tents, money now and damaged ones, and became old, which is plastic or cloth sheets covering these tents. These tents cannot protect these people who are living under these tents from rain, from wind, from water flooding. And we are in coastal area, which means water flooding could be happen, and will have a serious damage from tens of thousands of people. Under these tents, there's starving people. There's children, women, elders, patients, even disability. And they are suffering due to the shortage of aid. All of that we learned earlier, a few months ago, from this situation. And we called all actors, all of that we had these plans. But there was no response. At least to pressure Israel to put in all the equipment, all the needs in order to be prepared for such winter, which we are in the early beginning of this winter, and we have high concerns about not only the status of the tents, the lives of the people who are staying under tents. We have to talk about these infants, newly born children who are staying in tents, and they are, suffering from everything. And we have these hospitals, which about 80% of the hospital are shortage of medicine. So, sickness and people, the food, the famine situation, and such conditions, the Israelis destroyed the basic infrastructure in Gaza Strip, and we have in each corner of Gaza and middle area in the south, there's rubble of the homes which was destroyed. We have 45 million tons of rubble everywhere. We have been today to Qnews to the south, which almost destroyed the big city, which was completely destroyed, and people still staying under the rubble, be protected by one another from such conditions. Water from the spaces that they are staying in. And they could see the children in such cold weather, no clothes, no blankets to cover their weak bodies, and sometimes these sickness, these frustrations in the face of this kind of anger and sadness, this mixture of feelings that these children are carrying towards what's happening. 1 year ago, more, they were in their schools, their homes,
Yes.
and now
well, yes. Well, Dr. Nasiba, now the question for you, could Israel's blockade and restrictions on aid delivery during winter be legally classified as war crimes under international law, and can it be further used as evidence to support the ongoing cases against the senior Israeli officials at the ICC?
Certainly. Whether this blockade is during winter or summer, certainly the prevention of the passage of basic humanitarian aid to the civilians is considered a war crime. The fact that Israel has been continuing to do so for such a prolonged period of time, and that it is noticing the effect on the civilian population, it has been reported very well by the international agencies, the UN agencies, and special rapporteurs, and different organizations that are part of the UN. Nonetheless, Israel continues until today to do this. Therefore, it's certainly going to be used again and again in proceedings, not only against the senior officials of the of Israel, but also against others. This type of crime, whether we're talking about war crimes, crimes against humanity, or genocide, which is under investigation now in the International Court of Justice and will continue to be so, is a crime that is not committed by one or two persons only. It is a crime that has been committed by state institutions as well. There are several people who are within lower ranks in the army who have been involved as well in this genocide and in other war crimes and crimes against humanity. And in principle, all of them are accountable. Now, the International Criminal Court will probably not pursue every individual criminal, for justice. They will focus on the senior officials as you have mentioned. We have witnessed already Netanyahu and Gallant, and I would assume that in the future there will be more arrest warrants coming out from the ICC because the investigation continues, and there are a lot of more crimes to be investigated, and more arrest warrants that should be issued based on that. However, we could also remember that there are many other methods to prosecute criminals in international criminal law in addition to the International Criminal Court. For example, a number of states have universal jurisdiction. They decide in their own legal jurisdiction and criminal jurisdiction that they can prosecute any war crime or crime against humanity. We could continue to seek this type of justice for other individuals as well who might have been involved in such crimes.
Dr. Nasiba, please stay with us. We will continue our discussions, but let me thank Mr. Amjad Al-Shawa, the director of the Palestinian NGO Network. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Now, before we continue our discussion, let's take a closer look at the Gazans who are grappling with a worsening humanitarian crisis. Can the international community act swiftly and compassionately to ease their pain? Let's shine a light on Gaza's plight with this report.
As winter approaches, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza intensifies, with conditions worsening by the day. A spokesperson for the United Nations reported that people in parts of northern Gaza are facing extreme difficulties after weeks under Israeli siege. In addition to the ongoing bombings, areas like Beit Lahia have been severely affected, with no rescue services available for over 40 days. Humanitarian efforts to assist those in need have been severely restricted. According to the UN, only about one-third of the 129 planned humanitarian missions to Gaza were allowed by Israeli occupation forces to proceed. The remaining missions were blocked or delayed for security or logistical reasons. This has led to severe shortages in food, medical supply and fuel, especially in Rafah and northern Gaza. With winter rains already beginning, the situation is worsening. Nighttime temperatures have dropped below 10 degrees Celsius, and many of Gaza's 2.3 million residents, including over 1 million displaced, are living in makeshift shelters where they are exposed to the elements. The United Nations and its partners are distributing tarps and other essential supplies to provide shelter for over 76,000 families. However, the demand far exceeds the available resources, and many people remain without adequate shelter. The destruction of the homes and infrastructure continues to worsen the crisis, with the death toll rising to over 44,000 according to the latest report. As winter conditions worsen, the international community must act urgently to provide the necessary aid to address the growing humanitarian disaster in Gaza.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Dr. Nasiba. Sir, now, what are the challenges faced by the humanitarian organizations in delivering aid to Gaza during the winter, and how can these challenges be overcome, keeping in mind that the situation now is much worse than the last winter, since the Israeli blockade of the Rafah border crossing has been strictly implemented?
The problem is that Israel has been continuously not only blocking humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, and not only destroying the Gaza Strip quite fiercely. However, in addition to that, Israel has been also destroying the infrastructure that has allowed to distribute humanitarian aid. Most importantly, I would note the UNRWA. Israel has been fighting the UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for the Palestine refugees. Israel has been fighting the UNRWA directly. It has murdered a number of a huge number actually of its workers, including the humanitarian workers. It has destroyed a lot of its facilities, and it is now actually preventing it from distributing aid and doing its work in the Gaza Strip. It's important to remember that UNRWA has been working in the Gaza Strip since 1948. So basically, it has the infrastructure, it has the know-how, and it is the most qualified to conduct a huge operation in the Gaza Strip, and that's why, unfortunately, Israel has been one of the main reasons why Israel has been focusing on destroying this organization. Now, other humanitarian organizations tried to step in over the past few months in order to help with humanitarian aid. And despite the fact that this has been after coordination with Israeli state institutions, but nonetheless, some of these humanitarian aid missions have been also directly targeted by Israel. When you also look at the Red Cross and a Palestinian Red Crescent, you will find that they have also been part of the organizations that have been targeted with attacks by the Israeli army. So this is the main obstacle. Israel is not allowing any mechanism to function in the Gaza Strip. They have also totally destroyed the police forces in the Gaza Strip, which means that even if trucks are getting in and these trucks need protection in a situation of a disaster like this, there is no protection. And reports also have said that Israel is encouraging and supporting gangs in the Gaza Strip to take this humanitarian aid, and then they would sell it with very high prices in the markets. So is approaching.
Yes. Well, sir,
Yes.
speaking of the destruction of these sites, now, what are the legal implications of targeting these critical infrastructure sites like electricity and water systems, which directly impact the civilians during winter? What about the legal implications of those?
Yes, it is certainly criminal in international criminal law to target the basic infrastructures that are needed for civilian life. A party at war is allowed to only target military targets. Any other targets that are for the needs of the civilian population are prohibited. Unfortunately, what we have been witnessing is the continuous destruction of these civilian targets. We have also witnessed the prevention of any humanitarian aid to work. And in international law, this can range from a war crime, if it is an incident act, to a crime against humanity when it is systematic and widespread, to genocide when the intention behind all of this is to destroy a population in whole or in part.
Well, Dr. Nasiba, one final question. So whose next move is it? Are we talking about the ICC? Are we talking about other international institutions due to the failure of the response by the international community? Whose move is next?
I think there will be a continuous attempt within all of the international courts to deliver justice.
Yes.
But it's very important here to say that these courts are not enough. What we actually need is the enforcement of the decisions of the courts, and this enforcement can only come by individual states first, when they implement and enforce these decisions and laws, but also by regional organizations,
Yes.
including, for example, Arab League, OIC, European Union, African Union, etc.
Yes, Dr. Nasiba, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this episode. Dr. Munir Nasiba, the Professor of International Law from Occupied Jerusalem. Thank you very much, sir, for your insights. And by this, we come to the end of this episode of Think Tank. Stay tuned for more updates here on Q News. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for joining us.